If there's something strange in your neighborhood, who are you gonna call? Well, a multimedia franchise that's been responsible for movies, comic books, animated series, and video games. With their flying poltergeists and proton packs, the images of Ghostbusters have certainly earned their place in popular culture. And why not? It's a concept of all sorts of wild potential, lovable characters, and solid, timeless humor. First conceived by Dan Aykroyd as a vast interdimensional spectacle, Ivan Reitman and Harold Ramis brought the finishing touches to his paranormal investigators, and a classic comedy was born, a big risk for Columbia Pictures that ultimately paid off. Ghostbusters is an incredible example of a lightning strike, all the right pieces coming together for an endlessly rewatchable and clever comedy. A lot of this is absolutely due to the personalities on display. The chemistry between Aykroyd, Ramis, Bill Murray, and Ernie Hudson is note perfect. They feel like a team working in sync, and each bringing something different to the table. Ray is the bubbly and overexcited optimist, Egon is the serious intellectual, Peter is the wacky oddball, and Winston is the curious everyman. If even one of the characters was off, I don't think Ghostbusters would have had nearly the same impact. The various ghosts that appear on screen are also marvelous imagination. Aykroyd really used his paranormal knowledge to create some memorable screen spooks. Who can forget the food-guzzling Slimer in the Sedgwick Hotel scene, or the terror dogs that possess Louis and Dana? What's remarkable is how Reitman uses visual language, so we instantly know what the Ghostbusters are talking about when they go into their jargon. The film was set in New York to give a sense of realism, and gives the film an advantage of making us buy how the ghosts and the equipment used to trap them work. The Twinkie scene is a brilliant use of writing, using humor to provide exposition, and making the later moment when Walter Peck orders the unit switched off all the more tense, as we know the catastrophic badness sure to occur. The finale with Gozer is an excellent stage piece of directing on Ivan Reitman's part, with one of the funniest reveals in cinematic history. Throw in Ray Parker Jr.'s unforgettable theme song, and while I could go on for a long time about why Ghostbusters deserves its status as a classic. Ghostbusters was an enormous hit in 1984, and it's no surprise it was turned into an animated series. Now this is a fairly common occurrence, but most cartoons based on movies were not good. Merely obvious attempts to cash in on a successful film. The Real Ghostbusters was an exception, one of the finest animated series of the 80s, the larger amount of the credit going to J. Michael Straczynski, who sought to capture the comedy and energy of the film in a 22-minute format. What makes The Real Ghostbusters work is not only the personalities remain intact, but it rejected the formulaic format common in animated show scripts at the time. Rather than merely copying and pasting the exact same scenarios and story beats for every episode, each script felt distinct, with new challenges and problems for the Ghostbusters to face. The ghosts all had different powers, different issues the Ghostbusters had to solve in order to trap them, and most importantly, they were actually quite frightening, with real stakes that could have spelled the end of New York. The villains were all memorable, whether it was the Halloween spirit Sam Hain, the boogeyman with a particular grudge towards Egon, and even H.P. Lovecraft's famous monster Cthulhu. That was one of a number of literary references the Real Ghostbusters utilized, including a clever twist on A Christmas Carol where they end up busting the actual ghost of Charles Dickens' famous story. The writers even managed to avoid major continuity problems with the movie by portraying the film in-universe as merely a biopic of the animated Ghostbusters. That allowed the animated series to have more creative freedom and not be completely held down by the movie. If there was one issue with the series, it was Slimer. Rather than the ghost of John Belushi, as Aykroyd affectionately called him, he was made a lot more childlike and annoying. I have to side with Peter, who frequently complained about Slimer's uselessness, but the show would always write in some excuse for why he was needed. However, the writers did not often make him the focus, and he was not even in every episode. It's not like he took over the show.
We now return to Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters.
Until Season 2, that is. Yep, Slimer proved so enormously popular, He was given a place in the title and became a much bigger focal point in the episodes, including always going on missions with the Ghostbusters. Peter was even rewritten to be a lot nicer and nurturing towards Slimer. This was due to ABC bringing in so-called consultants who gave a million notes to improve the show, including making the secretary, Janine Melnitz, more of a motherly character. I don't think the Slimer in the real Ghostbusters episodes are necessarily bad, but they definitely saw a certain downgrade, with the exception of the episode The Halloween Door. Written by Straczynski, this was a special episode with a major upgrade to the animation and brilliantly expanding the mythology of Halloween. This felt like a major event in the career of the Ghostbusters, with things getting very close to apocalyptic. I single this episode out because I think it's the best in the series, and this plot would have been an excellent Ghostbusters sequel in its own right. And it was only natural a Ghostbusters sequel would be released. Now, is Ghostbusters 2 on par with the first one? No. Is it as funny? Not really. Does it follow a lot of the same beats? Yep. And yet, there is still a good amount to enjoy in this returning escapade. The four Busters still exhibit that strong chemistry, and the new ghosts certainly help lead to some fun sequences, including the one in the courtroom. And Kurt Fuller's slimy bureaucrat actually comes rather close to reaching the sleaziness of Walter Peck. Meanwhile, Peter MacNicol more than serves as a humorous foil, as he becomes possessed by the power of Vigo the Carpathian. I also like the theme of the sequel, about how positive vibes will always be a more powerful instrument than negativity, hatred, and anger. The climax, set on New Year's Eve, also captures a lot of the Ghostbusters spirit, and it's neat to see Lewis don the jumpsuit too. With that said, Ghostbusters 2 definitely tried to appeal more to the younger audience. Ivan Reitman actually debated during production whether to include Slimer or not, and it shows, as his few scenes are rather superfluous and he only interacts with Lewis anyway. The film also does not fully explore Vigo trying to influence Ray, despite a couple scenes where this is briefly focused on. I can understand why Ghostbusters 2 is not fondly looked upon, and critics dismissed at the time for legitimate reasons. However, I think it does enough to be a decent, if repetitive, continuation. The Ghostbusters franchise lay dormant for a while, as Bill Murray was not interested in reprising Peter Venkman again, and the real Ghostbusters winded down its run. There was the short-lived Extreme Ghostbusters animated series, as well as a video game that reunited the main actors. The most successful attempt to expand the Ghostbusters universe was a comic book series by IDW, which really took Dan Aykroyd's original concept of multiple dimensions with different types of Ghostbusters to heart. These comics capture the right humor and fun of the property and takes the concept in all sorts of inventive directions. There's even a storyline where the Ghostbusters from the 80s animated series meet the IDW Ghostbusters, and the writers and artists clearly had fun putting these two distinct universes and art styles together. In 2016, a new team of Ghostbusters hit the big screen, with Paul Feig offering his own take. This has been a rather divisive film, with two groups of people, those who liked it and those who didn't. I fall into the category of folks who liked it. It's not a groundbreaking comedy by any means, but there are a lot of elements I enjoyed in the Ghostbusters reboot. First and foremost, the comedians this go-around had wonderful chemistry, with each talented comedian bringing something to the table. The back and forth between them provided plenty of laughs, and Feig took full advantage of the leaps in special effects technology with the ghosts featured on screen. Even the return of Slimer worked brilliantly, as gone was the childish Slimer of the cartoon, with the Ghostbusters having to deal with a rowdy party animal instead. Chris Hemsworth also managed to show how funny he is, with his dim-witted secretary Kevin occasionally stealing the spotlight from the leads. Even the villain's plan was an interesting one, while also providing reasons for the sudden spurt of paranormal activity. As great as the four leads were, the definite standout was Kate McKinnon as Holtzman. I don't think we've ever seen a truly crazy Ghostbuster, with McKinnon providing the perfect reaction shots, and the moment where she leaps into action is the crowning moment of awesome in the film. Feig clearly had a lot of fun putting the action set pieces together, And as is traditional with Ghostbusters movie, the climax proved to be a real highlight, with the filmmakers finding a clever way of bringing the logo to life. I will admit, the more scatological jokes didn't quite work for me, as they felt a tad immature even for Ghostbusters, but most of these were thankfully in the first act. Kudos to Paul Feig and his talented team for managing to make a solid addition to the franchise. And while there won't be a sequel, the new Ghostbusters have managed to earn their place in the comics along with the original team. And there is still talk of an animated Ghostbusters movie, but told from the point of view of the ghosts they trap. That provides a lot of room for creativity. In conclusion, whether it's the original Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters, or the new Ghostbusters, I have a lot of affection for this property. And the theme song too. Because, come on, who are you gonna call?